Right now, somewhere, a child is bored. Scheduled, supervised, screened, and bored. For most of human history, that child did not exist. Ancient children spent their days in a way that would terrify a modern parent, and they turned out fine. Better than fine. They turned out human. Today, childhood is a managed project. Playdates on a calendar. An adult always in the room. A screen when the adult gets tired. Every hour filled. Every hour filled. Every hour filled. Every risk removed. That is brand new. And it may be quietly breaking our kids. Because for 100,000 years, nobody scheduled a child's day. Nobody watched them every minute. There was no school, no homework, no toys from a store, and almost no adult supervision at all. So what did ancient children actually do all day? They played. That was the whole job. But surely they were working to survive. You would think so. A hard world should mean hard little workers. It was the opposite. Anthropologists who lived with the last hunter-gatherer peoples found that their children did very little real work. They had more free time than almost any children who have ever lived. Some studies found hunter-gatherer kids spent most of their daylight hours simply playing well into their teens. A psychologist named Peter Gray spent years studying how these children actually lived. The picture was always the same. From morning to night, the children moved in a pack, ages 4 to 15, roaming together with no adult directing them. The little ones followed the big ones. The big ones watched the little ones. They drifted out of camp, into the bush, and back again all day, mostly out of any grown-up sight. A modern parent calls that neglect. A hunter-gatherer called it Tuesday. And they were not helpless out there. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, anthropologists watched children as young as 5 leave camp with a digging stick and a tiny bow. They climbed tall baobab trees for fruit. They dug their own roots. They knocked small birds out of the air. By their teens, many Hadza children were gathering a real share of their own food. Not because an adult made them, because to a child, foraging looked like the best game in the world. So picture an ancient child's day. There are 3 things they did with it. None of them happen anymore. The first thing they did was play at being adults. They did not sit and get taught. They copied. A boy made a tiny bow and stalked grasshoppers in the grass. A girl carried a doll made of bark exactly the way her mother carried a baby. They built small huts. They dug for roots no one asked them to dig. They acted out the hunt, the dance, the argument, the chase. And none of it came from a store. There were no toys to buy, so the children made everything themselves. A ball of tied grass, a doll of bark and string, a whistle cut from a reed, a whole imaginary hunt built out of sticks and shouting. A child with nothing has to invent, and so they were inventing all day long. And they drifted toward the grown-ups they wanted to become. The boys threw sticks at targets, tracked beetles like big game, and came home bragging about a lizard as if it were a buffalo. The girls carried bark doll babies on their hips, pounded pretend food on flat stones, and minded the truly little ones. Nobody handed out these roles. The children chose them by copying the adults they admired most. Anthropologist David Lancy, who spent decades studying childhood across cultures, found this everywhere. Children learned the whole of their culture by pretending to live it. The play was not a break from learning. The play was the learning. There was no teacher, because there did not need to be one. And the real teachers were not the parents at all. They were the other children. A 7-year-old taught a 4-year-old to climb. A 10-year-old showed a 6-year-old which berries were safe and which would kill you. The knowledge of the whole band passed downward through the pack, hand to hand, game to game, with barely a grown-up in sight. The second thing they did was roam, completely free. In a hunter-gatherer band, a 5-year-old could disappear for hours into a mixed-age gang of children and no one panicked. They climbed trees most parents today would faint at. They played near real fire. They handled real knives. Among the Aka and many others, toddlers used sharp blades while the adults simply watched, calm. The freedom was not carelessness. It was the point. A child who is trusted to handle danger becomes an adult who can. So the children were given the world early and trusted to meet it. And they were rough with each other. They wrestled, they chased, they play-fought in shrieking piles until somebody cried, and then they sorted it out themselves. No adult blew a whistle. No adult named a winner. Learning to push and then stop, to lose and then recover, was something they practiced 100 times a day on their own. A single day could hold a dozen small adventures. A river to cross, a snake to run from, a honey tree to raid, a fight to win and lose and win again. They came home filthy, scratched, and certain of one thing. The world was theirs to explore, and they were equal to it. The third thing they did was nothing at all. Huge stretches of an ancient child's day were empty, lying in the shade, watching ants, half listening to the adults talk, wandering with no goal. They were, by modern standards, deeply bored constantly. And out of that boredom came games, stories, and inventions, because a bored child with a whole landscape and no screen has to make something happen. Nobody filled that time for them, nobody could. And the empty hours did something a packed schedule never can. A modern child says, "I am bored," and an adult rushes in to fix it with a class, a screen, a plan. An ancient child said nothing because there was no one to say it to, and no one who would have understood the complaint. Boredom was not a problem to be solved. It was the wide open space where childhood actually happened. Now, was any of this dangerous? Yes, genuinely. Children fell. Children were hurt. In some hunter-gatherer groups, a real share of children died before they grew up, from accidents, from illness, from the world being hard. The freedom had a cost, and it was sometimes terrible. But the daily life of the surviving child was not anxious supervision. It was independence. The adults were nearby, but they were not hovering. The child was expected to become capable and was handed the freedom to do it. Risk was not something to delete. Risk was the teacher. And here is the part that should stop you. That free, roaming, unsupervised, slightly dangerous play was not wasted time. It was the most important work a child did. Scientists who study brain development now believe that this kind of play, child-directed, physical, a little risky, with no adult running it, is how young mammals build themselves. It is how they learn to handle fear, how they learn to lose and recover, how they read other people, take turns, settle their own fights, and calm their own bodies down. A young animal denied free play grows up emotionally broken. We are young animals too. For 100,000 years, every human got a massive daily dose of exactly that. It was just called being a kid. Then, in about 2 generations, we deleted it. We brought childhood indoors. We filled every hour with lessons and leagues and screens. We put an adult in charge of the fun. We decided that a child out of sight was a child in danger, so we kept them in sight all the time. The roaming pack became one kid alone in a room with a tablet. In 1970, a typical child still roamed a wide circle of the world on their own 2 feet. Within a single lifetime, that circle collapsed to the front yard and then to the couch. Today, the average child spends hours a day staring at a screen and only minutes in the wild, unsupervised play that every human before them lived inside. We did not just change childhood, we shrank it to the size of a room. We did not do this out of cruelty. We did it out of love and fear. We wanted them safe. So we removed the risk, the boredom, the freedom, and the pack, the 4 things their minds were built to grow on. And right as free play collapsed, something else climbed. Childhood anxiety, depression. A generation of kids who are safer than any in history and more afraid. So look again at that bored, scheduled, watched child. They are not weak. They are not broken. They are a wild animal raised in a cage, wondering why they feel so strange. For 100,000 years, a child spent all day running with a pack, free, bored, trusted, and unwatched. It is the oldest childhood there is, and some part of your child is still waiting for it.